Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Human Performance Outliers podcast with Zach Bitter. Welcome, everyone. If you enjoy the show, please consider subscribing on your favorite podcast listening platform and YouTube. You can now also check out the full video episode on X. Please also consider sharing your favorite episodes and leaving a review. If you do that and tag me or send me a screenshot, I will enter you in a monthly raffle for a free 30-minute consultation with me. For full episode details, including notes, timestamps, transcripts, and the show Patreon page, and other ways to support the show, please head over to my website at zachbitter.com. There you can find all my coaching services, including some new offerings for 2025. You can also sign up for my Substack newsletter, where I have been publishing my training journal weekly, as well as other topic-based posts. If you have any questions or feedback, please don't hesitate to reach out to me on my website or at hpopodcast@gmail.com. A big thanks to Element, Delta G Ketones, Currents, and Maui Nui Venison for supporting the podcast. A full description of how I use these products can be found at the end of the episode. Discounts, promotions, and details can also be found in the show notes and at the end of the episode. All right, Alyssa, welcome to the show. I'm excited to have you come on and chat about some ultra running stuff.
Thanks for having me on. Been a fan of yours for a while. I mean, you're a legend, so I'm very honored to be speaking with you.
Yeah, I swear every year I think back to kind of when I first got into ultra running, and it was like I kind of got in on this like that wave in like the early like 2010-ish time frame where the sport was really starting to kind of find its place in terms of kind of where we're kind of seeing it go today. And it was like back then it was like I was this young guy in the sport and kind of coming up, and now I'm like kind of the old guy in the sport. So but yeah, it's been fun to kind of watch the sport grow and all the different angles it kind of has taken over the last decade plus.
Yeah, no, it's funny because I started in about 2015, so 10 years ago, which is a bit wild to say. And thinking about how trying to explain to people what an ultramarathon was just, there was no comprehension of it still at that point. And then where it is now, and people totally get it. They know what you're talking about. They either have done one, they know someone who's done one. It's pretty wild that it's still not mainstream, but it's becoming actually comprehensible. And then they ask you if you've ever run a marathon. You're like, okay, sure.
Did you do Boston? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's like, yeah. The one topic I always like to get into nowadays, because it seems like this is sort of shifted too, is just like kind of what was your background in sports? Did you do a lot of sports as a kid, like when you were in school and things like that?
Yeah, I grew up in a family that sports that's just what we did. My dad was a football player in college and then went on to do triathlons and marathons. My mom was a cross-country skier. She biked across the country, biked across Europe. So I just grew up in a family where I truly did not realize how prevalent, like I didn't realize that endurance sports and families weren't a thing, because we would just go out and hike for 15 miles or bike across Prince Edward Island. And so I feel very fortunate that I had two parents who very much led by example in the endurance sports world in particular. But I grew up, I think I started playing soccer when I was 3. I played lacrosse starting at 5 and played lacrosse in college. I was a cross-country skier. Went to a ski academy, Stratton Mountain School, my freshman and sophomore year. And that's where I really learned about training, about, having a training log where you have a number of hours you want to hit for the year, where you get lactate threshold tested, all of those pieces that most 14-year-olds aren't exposed to. And so sports have always held a lot of value in my life. I've learned about that, or learned through them. I think it makes a lot of sense. I am where I am because of the background, and I can't imagine my life without them, for sure.
Yeah. Was there something about running that kind of caught your attention at some point where you decided like this is where I want to kind of spend a lot of my physical energies towards?
It wasn't. When I was younger, and when I say younger, I say before 10 or 11, I used to always say, like, oh, I hated running. It's like, well, okay, I would say probably not that many 7-year-olds want to go out on a run. But
Right.
I would run for the sports. And then my parents being who they were, my mom was like, let's start running. And so we do like a run walk thing. When my sister was playing soccer, or brother was playing a sport. And then probably around 11 or 12, I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, which is very similar to Crohn's disease. And for some reason, that was a catalyst for finding this really strong love of running. For some reason, running became this source of freedom from a lot of uncertainties. I don't respond well to medication. I was having a lot of health issues and complications. And running just became this anchor. It was like this expression of being free in a way. And so I remember distinctly one run when I was in 7th grade. It was just this 1.5 mile loop, and I just felt like, this is what flying feels like. This is complete freedom. And that was just this incredible light bulb moment, and running just stuck. And I wasn't really a cross country runner in high school. I was a cross country skier, so we did a lot of long distance runs. We'd go out and we'd spend 4 to 5 hours on the trails, eating snacks, hiking up the hills, and I just thought that was so fun. I love either the really short stuff or the really long stuff. I hated 5Ks. Have always hated 5Ks. Probably will until the day I die. And so I just feel like I probably didn't fit the mold of the distances that traditionally are what runners do. So I feel like I've probably been a runner since I was maybe 10 or 11. But I was waiting for something like an ultramarathon to come about. And I read Dean Karnassus's book when I was 10, and I said, I'm going to do that someday. Like, I knew that. And
Hmm.
then when I graduated college, I was a lacrosse player. And I went, well, I really love running. I'd kind of been running throughout. This dream of doing an ultra, I'm going to make that happen. I'm going to skip the marathon. I'm going to go to the 50K. So 2 months after I graduated college, I ran my first 50K and was like, wait, this is really cool. I love this. It felt like when everyone else started getting tired, I just started getting more energy and just was so curious about how far I could go.
Hmm. Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I'm extra interested in the topic of like people's kind of upbringing and what led them to ultra, or just in whatever fitness pursuits tend to kind of they gravitate towards. I was actually at a summit this last weekend, and one of the presenters was talking about kind of the increased specialization that we see the youth get into now, where you might be on like a like youth baseball team and be training year round for baseball as a middle schooler. And when I think about just it sounds like your kind of introduction to ultra running is kind of similar to mine, where I was in sports all the time as a kid and I just loved moving. And then running was long distance running was what I was maybe better at. And I kind of had to learn to discover that though. And I didn't like overextend myself too seriously with it. Not even really until college, where I really started thinking about it as something I wanted to do even year round, really. But I look back at that and kind of see kind of how maybe I was a little bit further behind some of my peers at the collegiate level in terms of when I started taking it seriously. And I'm like, part of the reason I think I still do it now is because I really had to learn that I liked it better than other things, and really narrowed down what I liked about running because I had exposure to a ton of other stuff. And, you know, before the sport professionalized to the degree that it has today, it was like, you're going to be doing this stuff for the fun of it. So I think learning to do it for the fun of it before you really have any sort of success that leads to anything monetary or professional with it is just, in my opinion, just such a more sustainable way to go about it. And hopefully something that kind of keeps someone like you or myself in the sport for longer than we maybe would otherwise.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I never started running ultras because I thought this was possible. I never assumed that I was going to have this journey to becoming a professional athlete or have this be my career with kind of all encompassing coaching, etc. But I will say I never got into it because of that. But at some point, I believed that it was possible. And so that fire of like, I think for some reason I'm okay at this. I'm just going to keep trying. And I think one day this is going to happen. So it's kind of this funny, and maybe they're on the same spectrum. They're not opposites, but it's like never got into it because I thought I'd be any good at it, but also started to realize after a few years, maybe if I stick with this, it could become a reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's that interesting thing where I think a lot of people that were in our spot is sort of kind of was something we learned about as we went. And for me, I'd be curious what your kind of thought is with this. Is like when I was a school teacher originally, and that
Me
was like
too.
what I assumed I was going to be doing for
Yeah,
my
me too.
career. Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll
Yeah.
have to dive into that a little bit maybe. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I got to a point where it was my fourth year of full-time teaching, and I had had enough results at that point where like brands were starting to reach out to me, and they were brands that I was already using. So I was like, this seems like a really good fit. And I was also had people back then. It was like, coaching was getting it's pretty new to the sport even.
Mm-hmm.
So
Totally.
people would reach out and say, hey, do you coach? Yeah. So I remember like that last year of teaching, I just ended up like building up a group of maybe like 15 coaching clients, to the degree where I was starting to see the writing on the wall, where it's like, hey, there's kind of like two semi-unique paths here, like a full-time teaching career or professional athleticism alongside coaching. And to try to do them both is probably going to be unsustainable. Or with teaching, it seemed like there was always either a lot of time or no time at all, because you got kind of summer where you can get quite a bit of freedom, but then when you're in the school year, it's like you're in it, and um, there's not a lot of wiggle room there. So I talked to the principal and was like, hey, I've got this opportunity. I think I might try to take advantage of it, because in 10, 15, 20 years, that probably won't be on the table any longer. Whereas teaching will sort of always be there to some degree. If I wanted to go back into that, it's not like my legs aren't going to determine whether I can teach or not. So I kind of took that risk, but it was one of those things where I was so terrified of what does this mean? Because I went to school, went to college, I got the degree, I got the job I wanted. I even got into the actual school district I really aspired to get to. And it was like that was all sort of like a very clear, like as long as I do what I'm supposed to do, like it's pretty predictable. I could teach the rest of my life with very little insecurities there. And I mean, I also had a special ed license too, which basically made me employable at almost every school district in the country. So it was like I went from a very predictable kind of do this, get that, to a little bit more of a, all right, I know what I need to do to maintain an athletic career, but there's a lot of uncertainties built inside of that. So I've always kind of had this mindset of I'm going to have to retire from running professionally at a very young age relative to most careers. I need to have other things in place so that that transition isn't like financially problematic. So, getting into kind of all the other stuff that kind of come along for the ride now, which was sort of growing along the sport as well, which is like social media, podcasting, coaching, and these things were always things I was interested in, both from stuff that I liked, but also things as like, all right, there's legitimate careers in these as well. So yeah, I'd love to kind of hear about the way you kind of navigated that time frame where you kind of went from like, okay, this is cool, this is fun, to, oh, now brands like On are reaching out to me and want me to be on a team and be a legitimate professional athlete.
Yeah, well, your story resonates so deeply. It's very, very kind of similar, I think, in how things came about. It's very. I went to college 30 minutes. I grew up in the East Coast in Vermont, went to school in Western Massachusetts, everyone around me went to New York City or Boston to pursue investment banking or consulting or, very tangible, high paying jobs. And I just went the total opposite direction, took a teaching job out in Hawaii at an international school, assumed I was going to do that. I was going to, there was going to be travel, there was going to be adventure wrapped into being a teacher as well. But that was probably what I was going to do for the rest of my life. I accepted I was never going to get paid that much, and that was fine. But I always kind of kept pursuing the running side of things. With my husband, who's in the military, there is a lot of job variability with moving a lot of times. So I was able for certain periods of time to pursue the running, but I didn't have, we're talking like 2018, 19, like still kind of on the early side of really the professionalization, I'd say, of ultra running. And then, let's see, I landed a teaching job at a very high-end private school in Monterey, California, and went into that, and the running was starting to really take off. And then I got a job opportunity at Uphill Athlete, and I was sitting there being like, and I knew that I was going to have to leave the teaching job anyway because we were moving to San Diego, and I was sitting there and I was like, well, I could delay essentially my dream to pursue this for another 4 or 5 months, and who knows what's going to happen. Or I can say I'm going to take this right now, because don't we teach our kids like to do that, to chase that dream? And I was like, it's literally sitting in my lap, the thing that I have wanted and pursued for honestly like 3, 4, 5 years. And so I went to the administration and I said, hey, I need to leave early, and they were not happy with it. And I do feel badly that the timing wasn't ideal, but I was also like, look, I'm just gonna take this. But there were points along the way where we lived over in Italy for a couple of years, and I didn't really have a stable job for the first year. It's very hard for military spouses to work in Italy. They've actually changed a little bit, but we could only essentially work US government jobs in Italy. We cannot take Italian jobs, or we couldn't. And they also need to employ a lot of Italians, because it's kind of the agreement is like, hey, we'll bring employment to you so we can have a base here. So I'm looking at my career being like, I'm an aspiring, maybe one day will be professional ultra runner who, is tutoring some kids with no actual job, and my friends are over here on Wall Street and working for JP Morgan, being like, what am I doing with my life with this degree? And so, yeah, it looked murky, and it looked really, I felt like I had nothing to show for all of this hard work and this degree that I'd put a lot of effort to. And then things just kind of kept coming together. And like the results started being where they needed to be to have, brands like On pay attention. And that now I look at, I'm like, I wear a lot of hats. I've kind of been able to create this career, but very similar to you, I have always thought about the future, that there are only so many years where I'm able to run at the level that allows me to be a professional athlete. So I am always, and maybe this takes a little bit away from the true pinnacle of what I can be, but I have always needed to have more than just running in my life, whether it's coaching, whether it's podcasting, mentoring athletes. I've started doing actually a little bit of agency work, and helping with brand partnerships. And I'm always ready for the next step of my career, and I'm always building pieces into that. So yeah, I mean, I think similar mindset to what you had, where it's like, yes, we do take this opportunity to be a professional athlete, but also we're always looking at what's coming in the future, because I think the most dangerous place you can be in as a pro is being comfortable where you are, because there's so many variabilities with we get a career-ending injury, just things happen that I think we always have to be prepared for what the future looks like. And the more that we can do now to set ourselves up for that future, the better off we are.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's also interesting nowadays too because you have like, there's so many different outlets outside of the sport itself that sort of offer themselves up to you that are kind of built maybe on the backbone of results as you get more eyeballs on you and things like that, but are also just kind of the way the world is shifting with the online presence side of things. And um yeah, I was the other thing that teaching kind of taught me was we'd have summer break. So like I was in administration, so I had basically 3 months where I could do whatever I wanted. So it was like kind of like just like summer break as a kid almost, to be honest. And it was like always every year I'd get to like August. We'd always start at the beginning of September in Wisconsin. And I'd get to August and I'd just be like, this is fun, but I need something else other
Yeah.
than just the training and
Yeah.
racing and whatever so I always kind of knew in the back of my mind, even when I stepped away from teaching, regardless of whether it's for financial reasons or otherwise, like I need to be doing something to kind of give myself outlets outside of this. There's only so much running you can do. There's only so much, like diving in one dimensionally into something before you need a distraction or like a release from that.
Yeah. I've also been always very motivated by being a part of and helping a whatever being out there that's greater than myself. And when I just focus on Alyssa Clark running, that's not big enough. Like I'm not big enough in the world to take that absolute complete focus. I mean, hands down, being a professional athlete is a selfish endeavor. I think it's almost impossible not to argue that. And for me, I have always needed to have some outlet where I was helping society outside of just being that professional athlete. And when I have leaned too far into being a pro, I've actually had worse results because all I've done is obsess about myself. And that has never,
Yeah.
it's never given me the edge. So I do tend to get way too excited about too many opportunities. So sometimes I swing a little bit too far where I'm like, okay, I moved a lot of parts around for me to be able to be really good at the running part, and I'm not even prioritizing the running part of today. Like, okay, that's too far. But also, I do think there's so much value for me personally, and I admire the focus and the ability for athletes to perform at that very high level without those other pieces. But I've always needed other pieces in my life than just myself as the main actor, we'll say.
Hmm. Yeah, and I always wonder too if there's maybe some uniqueness with ultra running where it's not like an NFL football game or an NBA basketball game or something where like your mind in competition is pretty short. It's intense, obviously, but like the duration is short relative to like going out and running 100 miles or, like when you're running these 200 mileages and stuff like that. So it is also something where I always think about like the training itself. You get to like a physical limitation before you can really start to get to the hard part mentally of what you're going to see on race day. So part of me thinks like I need to have some intellectual rigor in my day outside of the training so that my body's still resting, but my mind is actively being able to stay on, stay focused, stay disciplined, and not get distracted and just like lackadaisical and off-centered from what the goal would be. So I think there's maybe something to that too, where like you give yourself enough like cognitive stuff to occupy your mind with. You just get good at tolerating large chunks of time of using your brain essentially.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I would also say that looking at many of the historically like very strong ultra runners, they're very smart people. And so there's I think this cognitive need that has to be satisfied in order for us to perform. Like, yes, we are using our brain. Actually, that's kind of the superpower, is to be able to run well and also be able to manage all the logistics, because there's so many variables within an ultra compared to a 10,000 meter race or a 5,000 meter race. We just have so much time. And so I think that intellectual piece, like we need to stimulate that in many ways in order to be at our best and be able to adapt in the situation of the ultra. And also we are limited to, there's only so many hours as a pure runner you can train per day. I mean, a triathlete, you can hammer for so much time that just the amount of time they can train is so much more significant than we can. And so at some point it's like, you gotta fill the other hours of the day.
Just a quick reminder that Delta G ketones is my go-to exogenous ketone source. You can get 20% off at deltagketones.com when you use promo code BITTER20. Check out my full description of how I use Delta G ketones at the end of the episode.
Another thing I wanted to talk to you about that was kind of, I thought it's kind of unique at this point in time in the sport, from my opinion. Is like when I first got into ultra running, it was like you were kind of an ultra runner. And I mean, the sport was a little tighter in terms of like, there was kind of like, in terms of what people were paying attention to, is kind of like 100 milers and shorter. Now there's like, these 200 milers, you're seeing these timed events get a little bit more momentum, kind of back, not nearly to where they were in their historical peaks, but like we're just seeing like the multi-day side of things grow up. We're seeing enough talent in the sport where like, a 50K runner might be different than a 200 miler and things like that. So there's like a little more specialization even within the different disciplines there. So someone like yourself, you've actually got a pretty diverse set of results to your name in recent years, actually, too, where you've done well at 100 milers, you've done well at like international races like UTMB events and things like that, and you've done well at some of these multi-day events too. And is there something like how do you go about navigating a race schedule with interests and things like that, with being able to kind of perform at that kind of variety?
Yeah. I would say I'm not as diverse as I could
Or maybe
be.
the better question is, have you ever, do you have a favorite?
Oh,
maybe
yeah.
the better question there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, it's funny because I just DNF'd to like flatter, faster 100K, and I was like, I'm getting back into mountain training. I'm like, I'm never going to run anything less than 100K fast. Yeah, mountainous 100 plus milers. That is my absolute love. I was literally having this conversation in my head yesterday off a run where I got pulls out and was having a great time being up in the mountains, where I was like, I don't think I want to try to be diverse. I think I'm just going to do what I love doing. And that's, being in the mountains for long periods of time. I would say that I appreciate that, because I feel like I could be a lot better at I've really struggled in 100Ks recently. That seems to be my kryptonite. I psych myself out because they're fast now. Like you cannot sit. But again, 100 milers are fast now. Everything's fast now. So, I think it's really interesting. I definitely am a student of the sport in many ways, and I would very much argue that a very, very good 50K athlete is going to be somewhat different than a very good 100 miler, a very good mountainous 100-mile athlete. But so often we see a lot of crossover still, where, you have a Katie Scheid who, I think it was 2 years ago came second at OCC. And then the year after is winning Western States and course record at UTMB. So, at the end of the day, I do think there is still enough room in the sport that, yes, we are seeing specialization, but we are seeing the top athletes still be the top athletes from 50K to, we'll see in just a week or so how Courtney shakes out at Cocodona. So yeah, I kind of sometimes try to give myself a little like pep talk of like, you don't have to be good at the 50K, that's fine. And then I'm like, well, the best athletes are good at everything, so maybe not quite yet. But I do I really do think that that is the direction that we are headed. I think that I don't think you can expect a marathoner to be doing, you can't expect a marathoner to be competing with an 800-meter runner. And with the explosion of the sport, with how it is being professionalized, I do think we're going to see the sub ultra up to 50K distance. There's not going to be as much crossover with someone who is, say, competing at UTMB. I think that is, the speeds are just going to increase, where it's just going to be very hard to specialize the training enough to be able to perform at the highest level in both of those scenarios.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we'll get there eventually. What I think is maybe the transition point we're in right now is where we see someone like Katie Scheid, who is able to, like, say, win canyons and then win Western States, win UTMB, like three fairly unique events. I mean, all trail mountain type courses, but you got a pretty wide spread in terms of like where the intensity you're going to be able to sustain, kind of trending up from canyons to UTMB. I think really what it comes down to is like Katie Scheid ran 3 races that year. She knocked them all out of the park. My guess is she sat down at the beginning of the year and was just like, okay, these are the 3 events I'm going to focus on, and this is how I'm going to get there. So she really prioritized those 3 events versus trying to do maybe what I would have seen kind of in the early days where, like, Tim Olson, when he won Western States, I remember he ran, back then it was the Montreal Ultra Cup, I think is what they called it, which is basically what the golden ticket races are now. He did all of them basically, and I think he was on the podium for pretty much every single one of them. And then he wins Western States at the end. So it's like that was the goal, but he could do quite well. But I think like the volume of racing maybe comes down and then allows someone like Katie Scheid to be able to do really well at these top tier events, despite them being at least slightly different from one another.
Yeah, I mean, I think I could not agree more. It's actually one of the conversations I have with athletes. I'm sure you do all the time, that I have with myself, and I think it's so easy. Like, gosh, every weekend it feels like there's another major race where it was gorgeous canyons, Black Canyon. There are all these incredible races, and it's so easy to be like, oh, I should be racing all of them. But the truth is, I use Katie as an example. I've used her as an example many times, is she is so deliberate. I mean, she raced UTMB, and the first race she's done since then in the trail world, we'll say, was Madeira a couple days ago, and she crushed it. And so she's incredibly deliberate. I think we look at a Courtney, and she seems to be able to, or she does race a bit more frequently than a Katie, but I think she was very deliberate last year to give herself a little bit of a break after the 3 the year before. So I do think with the level of competition and the level of specificity in training, is we're just going to see people having to make some choices when it comes to racing. I am in somewhat of a similar position. I try to have, those maybe 3 really I'm going for it races, maybe 4 if I can squeak one out, and the rest are secondary. And I think that shows the respect of your body, of your performance levels, of giving yourself enough time to train well, because racing does not allow you in many ways to train your best, because you're recovering, you're tapering, you're not building. So I do think we're going to see really this specialization also in the race selection and how many races people are racing per year. And that also, on the flip side, is very scary, because you're kind of reducing, you're putting more eggs in that basket. So yes, you're probably going to be able to really nail that. But if you don't, we all know those things happen all the time, where there's unexpected issues that come up in ultras that we could never anticipate. It's scary to be like, well, that was my shot for the spring season, and I don't have anything to show for it. Like, oh. But I also do think in order to be at the top, you have to kind of do that, or start to reduce that number.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. I think the other interesting thing too that sort of feeds into that topic is just like the way we prepare for these events, and that's another thing that's evolved a lot over the course of just my experience with ultra running is just like training theory to some degree. Um, when I was doing a little homework on you before inviting you on, it was I was listening to a podcast and you were kind of talking about the concept of just like you had this like large foundation of volume that you had established over the years of just kind of passion for running in the mountains and things like that. And then one thing that kind of moved the needle for you was when you got a little more specialized in the sense that you started doing more speed work. So I'd love to kind of hear about just your sort of philosophy around training. Is there kind of a protocol that you at least kind of scaffold in terms of like, all right, it's the beginning of a year, I'm going to start preparing, where you have like an order of operations of different types of workouts that you run through?
Yeah, well, first off, I will say I work with a coach. I work with John Fitzgerald out of CTS, and a lot of it
Okay.
is conversations with him. And a lot of the protocol behind what we are focusing on for training is based upon observations of weaknesses from the previous year. So for example, when I've been working with him almost exactly about a year now, and when I came to him, I felt like, man, I'm just really not as strong at uphill climbing as I should be. Like I hike too much, I should be running more. And so we had kind of an interesting amount of time before UTMB. It was a pretty major shift to pick up a new coach only a couple of months out. I'm so glad it happened, but he really didn't have the amount of time that I think someone would normally have. And so we really focused on uphill hiking and making that faster and doing, hill repeats in that regard. And then after UTMB, where we had a little bit more time, I had Puerto Vallarta, which was a training race trying to get back into UTMB for the following year. But the main goal was breaking the course record at Hurt. And for me to be able to do that, Hurt is not a fast race. There is a lot of running. You can run a lot of it, which I think is kind of shifting the mindset. But we just did a ton of steady state uphill intervals of, I maybe have during that period had 1 to 2 days of truly easy running, like an hour and a half of just relax, recover type running. The rest was very focused effort. And I think the biggest difference and shift I have seen in trail running from when I started, where just be like, time on feet, just get out there, like take the photos, eat the snacks, stop at the top of the mountain. And now every long run that I do is focused effort. It's not just adventure pace. It's like, yeah, we're going to run up this hill. Yeah, and I'm staying below zone 2 for the most part. Sometimes there's steady state worked into there, but there's a lot more intention behind the workouts, and there's a ton of speed work. At least during Hurt, it was, I think 2 speed sessions, and that, speed is a relative term, but like hard efforts, than 2 long runs, and intensity within the long runs. So it was a lot of load. We didn't need to work so much on volume because I had a lot of the volume from UTMB, from kind of the years of experience. So this was like, yeah, we got to work on a lot of time in that kind of uncomfortable space of like, the gas pedal is not fully down, but it's on. And so since then, after Hurt, kind of took a little break, but where I have felt the most space for improvement is my running economy on flats, slight uphills. Especially if you look at a UTMB race, that's kind of my major goal for this year. There's a ton of runnable sections, and I feel like my climbing and descending was pretty solid. But in the in-between periods, I just wasn't, you can, to go from, say, and of course we're saying all this, like a UTMB, you got a pretty loaded pack, it's a heavy carry. if you're running 9s or 9:30s on those flats and you can get that down to an 8, that's a lot of time. So we spent just a lot of effort on flatter, faster running, and just getting that running economy really up, doing hard intervals, and the long runs working more like at pace efforts. So that's been that phase with some VO2 max as well, interval focus. And then now we are shifting, and then that was kind of supposed to translate into a faster 100K at Desert Rats. I went into it. I don't really know what was going on. My heart rate was super elevated. Something was up. So that didn't work out quite the way we thought, but the training was there. So the training did its job. I'm kind of feeling the effects of it where I'm like, oh, wow, yeah, I can move faster on those flats, like without as much effort. But right now we're shifting more into those longer endurance days, longer hill intervals, steady state time, and just, bigger days in the mountains, like 4, 5, 6 hour days in the mountains. Like UTMB, because I have Lavaredo up next, and then UTMB, my UTMB training weeks could be anywhere from 24 to 28, 30 hours of just big mountain days. So definitely shifting more into the focused long runs rather than the shorter, flatter speed stuff.
Just a quick reminder that Currents is a product I use pre-workout and during events to help with blood flow, recovery, and fat oxidation. Check out currenzusa.com. That's currenzusa.com to see the 40+ studies they have, and use promo code BITTER20DEAL for 20% off your first purchase. Full description of how I use Currents at the end of the episode.
Yeah, the way I like to describe it is if I were given like a person and it was like guaranteed that their fitness was very balanced across the spectrum, then like I'm basically going to follow a principle of kind of least specific to most specific with
Totally.
when we're getting to these longer races, we're just doing more speed work earlier in the training plan than would say like a 5K runner would be doing those sort of things probably right around their race because it's very specific to it. And then you kind of leverage that fitness you're going to get from that speed work when you pull everything up, especially someone with a big foundation like you, then you get into the work of you're actually going to do on race day kind of at the end there. So you're really ready for what you're actually going to be doing out there. And then since most people aren't often coming to you with that kind of perfect profile, then it's like you have to sort of look at it through the lens of, where are the strengths and weaknesses? And this is one of the more fun things for coaching for me is like if someone has a good like record of their prior training, I can usually look at that and think to myself like, all right, what have they been doing the most of and what have they been doing the least of? And it's almost always whatever they've been doing the least of is going to be the thing that we can kind of poke and get the most out of in the short term and prepare them to be a little more balanced and give us the tools to really kind of go after the specifics of whatever they're going to do eventually. So, it's kind of the fun part about it is just kind of there's like a little bit of a fingerprint or a blueprint for every person in terms of what they've been doing, and then to some degree probably some of their natural strengths and weaknesses too on top of it. But it's kind of a fun puzzle to solve for ourselves and as coaches.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I would always say that my not coming from like a collegiate track or cross country runner, my low hanging fruit has always been just like honestly what you're super good at. that is where I struggle of just like, yeah, carrying a very like good pace over longer periods of time. And so for me, it's always like, okay, can we get that a flatter, faster pace further and further down without with getting the correlation of the heart rate and the effort coming down all the time. So for me, fast running has always been my low hanging fruit and will continue probably to be an area that we dedicate time in the beginning of the seasons, off seasons to increasing. And the interesting part of that is there's also a mental piece because I do the same with my athletes where I'm like, I mean, with a lot of athletes, I work with a wide range of mountain athletes, whether it's mountaineers, ski tours, actually probably a lot fewer trail runners than most people would expect. And for the newer athletes, for me, it's always like, okay, can we kind of like, what's our bare minimum of getting you to the finish line safely, or getting you to the top of the mountain safely? And then you can kind of play with that. But it is really fun to be like, okay, where have you traditionally excelled? How can we work on those weaknesses? But the other piece of it, as I was alluding, the mental piece, is that if you hammer someone's weaknesses too much, they feel really down on themselves. And so you have to always be playing with that balance of like, okay, we got to kind of give them, like we've given them all of these things they need to work on. We also need to balance that with like they're having fun, because I think as professionals, we're very, we're okay with that, because we know we need to work on that. We see the bigger picture of, this is not going to be maybe my bread and butter, the thing I love doing, but it's going to help me do the thing I love doing better. But if you're constantly hammering an athlete with their weaknesses, that gets really demoralizing. So I do think there is kind of a play with an athlete of like, okay, we're going to do, this one workout. It's maybe not your favorite, but also like, I'm not going to make you miserable the whole time, because at the end of the day, for a more recreational athlete, like there should be a lot of enjoyment in that training process.
Yeah, no, I love that. And it's also, I mean, I think there's some art within the professional side of things with that too, where it's one of those things where like if someone's signing up for 100-mile races and trail races in the mountains and things like that, chances are they like long days out on the trails.
Yeah, they
and that's
love
kind of
that.
what
Yeah.
brought yeah. So I think you have to keep room for keeping that aspect, that play aspect, that enjoyable part to it. And I think when you start to separate the professionals from the just the participants or the everyday ultra runners and things like that, I think you're maybe just looking at a little bit more of a through the lens of like, okay, this is a block of time where I have to be on and I'm going to follow the schedule as closely as possible, versus I'm going to probably need an off season at some point in order to make this sustainable. And maybe that off season is the time where you can sort of, ignore the heart rate, ignore the intensity a little bit, and go out and take some time to take pictures on some long,
Totally.
more like meandering adventures out on the trails and things like that. So, yeah, I think it's all just about like, yeah, I always say like the timeline cures all. If you have a good timeline, you can really do everything, and it'll be in your best interest too. So, plan ahead, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm actually curious what your thoughts are on off seasons. Do you try to work that in?
Yeah, yeah. Usually I'll do an off season where I kind of have two different ways I'll do it. And it's a little more difficult living in Austin here, because in Austin we kind of have to leave in order to do the second way really well. Whereas when we lived in Phoenix, I kind of had access to every type of running right out the
Mm-hmm.
doorstep. So it was like you kind of had all the tools available to you. But I'll look at it through the lens of I'm going to need a break, or a phase of time where I'm not just sitting around doing nothing, but I'm a little more unstructured, and overall volume is going to just be lower. I'm just letting everything kind of reset. I'm just waiting for that excitement to really get into the rigorous part. So I kind of think of it this way: when I come off of a goal race, I think, okay, what was the hardest part of that build? Just like the part that was the most demanding, the part where I was like, if I had to do this year round, it wouldn't be sustainable. And I kind of wait until that kind of drive to do that again comes back, and then I can start kind of layering in kind of that build back up to that sort of thing. And this my own blueprint kind of has followed like 2 weeks after that race, where the structure's basically gone. There'll be times where maybe I don't run at all during that time, and I'll be moving and doing some stuff, maybe focusing on some strength work or something like that. But it's not something where I'm going to sit down and say, okay, I've got to run this far, or I got to run this long, or I got to do this type of workout. And then the next 4 weeks, I sort of kind of like ease back the structure, but it's just like kind of a gradual escalation back to what would be a normal training week. And then I'm kind of usually mentally and physically in a spot where those all those signs are starting to pop up. The other burnout I've kind of found is, since I've done a lot more runnable stuff historically, and a lot of really boring courses like 400-meter tracks,
I don't know how
is
you do that.
you kind of get It's different, and I think there's a fatigue element to it that's mental that really kind of sneaks up on you. Where, and I actually discovered this, I think, the first time. It was in 2018. I went to Desert Solstice track invite, and I was in really good shape. Like all the fitness markers were there for me to run a really good race, and I just didn't have it. Like I felt like on race day, I felt like I didn't have the gears I wanted. I didn't feel like I had the mental fortitude, the desire to do it. Things that normally wouldn't be optimal, but I would have been I would have been able to get past it. Like it was slightly warmer that year. And I remember thinking like, oh, this heat is terrible, blah, blah. So it was just kind of like a lot more negativity towards it than there normally would be. So to start that next year in 2019, I didn't feel like I needed a long off season. I just felt like I needed something different,
Mhm.
just to kind of take a break from just like what I had been working on for. I think it was almost 5 years at that point. I've been chasing the world record for 100 miles, and I just said, okay, well, I'm just going to do something totally different. I wasn't in Western states, so I signed up for the San Diego 100 mile, and I just spent
Hey,
that whole
nice.
first half of the year training for the San Diego 100. Yeah. Yeah, and it was great. I mean, the training, it was still a lot of work, just like any other race would be. But I remember one of my long one went from, okay, I'm going to go on a track and run for 3-4 hours to I'd go out to Mount Ord, which was this spot out just outside of Phoenix where it's a 7.5 mile ascent that's like almost 5,000 feet. So my like peak week or my peak training long run was just doing 2 rounds of that. So you do 30 miles, almost 10,000 feet of climbing and descending. And it was just such a different experience. Um, I did that race, recovered from it. And when I went back to start training for flat fast stuff, not only did I notice like my mind was back and I was excited to do those type of workouts again and that type of training again, I was actually stronger because I was running up and down steep mountain stuff versus just running on the flats all the time. So like my efficiency, the first thing I noticed is like, okay, my pace returned, like that leg turnover and the paces I was hitting at like my high end of zone 2 came back really quick, but I was able to tolerate like a lot more of it. So going into that next training block, I was hitting markers like way earlier than I normally would in training. And then I went to a race in Milwaukee at the Pettit Center uh, as a training race was the goal for that race originally, because Spartathlon was going to be my goal race for the second half of the year. And I was getting fit fast enough where I was like, you know what, I'm just going to like see what happens on that day. And I ended up breaking the world record there where it wasn't even like supposed to be the race I was going to try to do that at. So, I mean, like I think there's also just like you were talking about too, is just like, there's like this mental, psychological piece to the puzzle where you kind of have to give yourself a break. And this is where I give like pro marathoners so much credit, is like once they kind of get into that pro marathon, I mean, ultra running maybe will change this now that there is a professional side of it, but like you've kind of hit the end road of what you can
Yeah.
transition towards. So now it's like you see these like Sarah Halls of the world who are just like still show this like incredible passion for it, but like it's just rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. And it's like I haven't been able to do that with the flat 100-mile stuff. It's been something where, I have to take a break from it and just dive into the trails for a while or do something different and kind of get that reset and refresh everything.
Yeah. No, that makes so much sense. It's a little bit how I kind of felt coming off of Hurt. I was excited to do something different of like flatter, faster, a 13-minute mile is not the best mile ever. So I feel that too. I actually am the end of my season right now is a little bit up in the air, and this sounds really funny to say, but the three that I'm contemplating are Kodiak, Javelina, and Doi Enthenon. And they're three completely different races. And it's basically because after UTMB, I don't know if I'm like, yeah, I want to go right back into like super technical jungle stuff. Okay, go to Thailand. I kind of want like in between like high altitude, but it's desert running, go to Kodiak. Or I want to do something completely different and go to Javelina. And I think that
Mhm.
what is really fun, as we were somewhat talking about before, is that we're so lucky that there is so much variability in the sport of what we can choose to do, and they can translate so well together. Because Is Javelina completely different than Thailand? Absolutely it is, but that doesn't mean that you can't be successful at both. I mean, one of my good friends is Jeff Mogavero, and he went from training for UTMB and then second at Javelina and running a sub
Yeah.
12. And it's like, or sub 13, sorry. And he had an
Hmm.
incredibly short window. I think, it's like 8 weeks or 10 weeks to do that. And it's so cool to see that they do translate very well, exactly as you were saying, that mountain strength translates to the flat translates to being able to, because every mountain race has flat fast running. Like there's always that component. Maybe the only
Hmm.
one is Ouray and Tour de Jean are the only two that do not have a lot of components of being able to move in between the mountains. So it is very fun to, I think, have that range and to explore that. As I was just saying, that I've given up on all flat fast. I'll be back for sure.
Well, I hope you do Javelina. I love that event. I think it's so much fun, and but obviously do what's calling you at the time. But yeah, that's a Javelina is also a good one if you're kind of maybe flat fast adverse because there's the heat component to it. It still is a trail, so yeah, you're running pretty much all of it, but you do kind of have that setup where it's like, okay, there's a variable in here that's non-optimized that's going to
Mm-hmm.
add a little bit of flavor and maybe takes a little bit of the juice out of the legs of the folks that are just real like historic, like they're traditionally are built on speed, fast running stuff. So, um, yeah, Javelina is a great one. So I'm voting
For
for that one.
kind of those exact reasons is that it's heat. I love heat. I don't know why. I love being hot. I really seem to gravitate towards that. Um, the looped course, Hurt is also a 5 loop race. I like that where, it's hats off to you
Mhm,
with the track, but it's like kind of that in between. I love seeing crew. It seems like it has a great
mhm.
atmosphere, and there is enough to break it up where it is, yes, it's you're running the whole time or like pretty much, but it's not just straight flat running. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's piqued my curiosity, so we'll see how it translates. But I got to get there at some point for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, if not this year, then down the road for sure. I think that would be a fun one. I
Yeah.
think everyone should try Javelina sometime.
Yeah.
Uh, I did want to kind of transition into kind of nutrition and stuff like that. I think this is just a topic that a lot of what we've talked about already is been something that's really grown within the sport in terms of just like, what do we do to optimize? I mean, we've known in other sports, obviously nutrition is a big component. We know it's got to be a big component for ultra running as well. And then it's just been like, well, what does that mean for our sport versus what we maybe have better research on and things like that. So, um, yeah, do you have any kind of specific like nutritional approach that you like to use kind of in your day-to-day nutrition? Um, and then once we kind of cover some of that, maybe we'll dive into just kind of how you structure your race and training nutrition stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually started working with Meredith Terranova through CTS. So I now have a nutritionist. I've had off and on worked with nutritionists throughout the years, and to be honest, haven't really from my own personal side, and just like haven't really had one that stuck in a way that has been
Hmm.
as impactful as probably I put the effort in to make it. And so this year I was kind of looking at like you've like we're always looking at how to tinker with performance, and I went, nutrition has really been a point of struggle for me with the ulcerative colitis. So I had my colon removed when I was 14. So it's a big, really unknown piece. Like there's, I think actually Meredith found one other ultra runner who does not have a colon who um is very successful. I think he was more like in the 15s or so time frame. And so we're now an N of two, but it was very hard to find not only a nutritionist who is ultra marathon focused, but one who has a willingness or like some knowledge of also not having a major organ. So it's been nutrition has been my kryptonite. It's really been the part of my running. If you look at the past and you see a lot of variability in results and such, it really came down to nutrition because my default was, well, if I feel this sick all the time, I am just not going to eat, and living off of the hopes and dreams of my ultra running, not of actual nutritional plans. So luckily, with her help and with, I think, just an openness, food has caused a lot of stress in my life because it automatically, or it has in many ways caused me pain. I mean, physical pain. And so I tend to live very
Mhm.
much in boxes of food. I will eat the same thing every day, all the time. And I'm very happy with that because it makes me feel okay. Whereas when I experiment, it can often lead to a lot of discomfort. And so I think for a long period with my nutrition is I kept trying to do the same thing with hoping for a different result, and it was the same outcome. And so I finally started, I think there were enough options, and also just the evolution of the sports nutrition industry has been really amazing to see, that all of a sudden there were more options for me to try, and I was able to shift my mindset probably starting, I think it was right around Moab or a little bit before that, where I was able to try different gels, where I was like, oh, and this works, and like, you know, all these things that I kind of been afraid of for a long time. So that made a huge impact on my racing of just, oh yeah, I can get calories in every 30, 35 minutes, not hours, and also being able to drink calories as well. Um, for the day to day, I mean, just what Meredith and I have done also in the last year, I'm a pescatarian, also just don't really eat that much fish, even if I do. But she was like, hey, your protein is super low. Also living in a van makes meal prepping, etc., just space is a lot more limited. So she has me tracking protein, which I have had a lot of aversion to tracking foods. It's not my favorite thing, but for some reason just tracking protein has helped a lot. She also has me track what I do in actual, like my longer runs, my harder efforts. So that is another piece that we're really working on. So those have been a few changes. And then I really struggled with my stomach during UTMB. It's funny now looking like UTMB was such an incredible race, but there are so many things that did not go that well. Looking back at it, that I'm like, okay, we need to tinker with some things. One of which was I think I visited every porta potty or viable bush on my way around the mountain that last year. So we're really trying to reduce that. And a couple of the pieces that I am playing with our salt intake. So because of the lack of colon, I had a sweat test done a couple of weeks ago, and it showed up only in the 600s, which is quite
Mhm.
low, and not what we were observing from actually, like Meredith and I have been playing with. I add electrolytes to the drink mix that I use. And we were finding that worked really well. So that supplementation, and we couldn't kind of figure out where that 600 number came from, because we're like, okay, it seems as though when I'm shooting for 900 to 1,000, that goes really well. And when I don't have that, things start going, like my stomach really turns on me. So she figured out by talking to my fellow and now N of two, that even though I am probably in the 600 range. I don't actually absorb. I have to take in 900 to 1,000 to absorb that 600 because of the lack of colon. So I'm expensive and inefficient, but we have figured out that that is one of the needs. And when my electrolytes are off, my stomach goes like that. And I can very well
Mhm.
see every situation where that has been true and been like, yeah, that makes total sense. The other piece that I've been playing with is the using currants, which is a black currant supplement. I kind of was testing it last year to see, like, I think with any addition or subtraction to your routine, you have to, like, we're playing with so many variables. I wanted to see, like, okay, let's be on it, let's be off of it. And so actually during hurt, started taking it during my runs. So I would take 2 capsules every 4 hours, and that along, I always take Imodium during my runs and during my racing every 2 to 4 hours. And I found that my stomach at hurt was it absolutely perfect? No, it wasn't, but it was a whole lot better than UTMB. And so with the
Mhm.
currents, that it's really helpful for GI distress. And so I think that along with kind of the pieces that I've been playing with, the electrolytes, etc., that has really helped with actual in race nutrition. So I plan to continue that. I've been using it during my training, and so far it seems to really be helping with one of the biggest pieces of my, let's say, puzzle solving.
Just a quick reminder that Element Electrolytes is my go-to electrolyte source. They are offering a free sample pack with purchase for all HPO listeners at drinklmnt.com/HPO. They also just launched a new flavor, lemonade. Check it out risk-free with their 30-day money-back guarantee. Also, check out my full description of how I use Element at the end of the episode.
Yeah, well, that's all really interesting stuff. I've got some follow-up questions. I
Yeah.
think it's like because I mean you're very unique, obviously, in this regard, and but who knows? Maybe someone's listening to this who's got a similar. I mean, I'm sure someone listening to this has probably got some sort of colitis, maybe not the same degree, but are dealing with like digestive issues and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, I started using currents this year just as I started looking at the research. It was like, okay, this is convincing enough to me that I'm going to start kind of applying it. I was looking at it more from like the blood flow side of things, because I think that probably is going to be there's going to be a lot of things downstream from that, from on the recovery side of stuff. Um, Kind of a side note, the first thing I actually like noticed was like my fingernails started growing like twice as
Wait,
fast as
oh,
they did before. And I says, I
that's
go
so
ahead.
funny you say that, because I climb quite a bit and I've been annoyed by how fast they've grown. I never put that together.
Yeah, and it was one of those things where like I'm not that observant to my fingernails that I would be like that I would notice like a subtle difference, but it was like twice as fast where I would clip them and then I'd be like at the computer like typing. I'm like, what is like I just clipped these like 3 days ago. So like I suspect that's probably just like maybe the improved blood flow is just creating like an environment in which like your fingernails are just growing a little bit longer. Um but yeah, I was curious, like, I thought about that because when you mentioned for digestion, I wonder if that's a blood flow thing as well, where you're getting better, like, blood flow to your digestion tract, and that's helping with it, and allowing you to maybe take in more calories or more fluid and things like that.
Yeah, I think that is definitely the case. I think it's also, I had taken currents before, but I'd only taken it at the start of the race, and then it's gonna wear off. I mean, I can almost always get through I'm like perfect for a 50K. 4-ish hours, 5-ish hours, I'm totally
Mhm.
fine. But it's when you start pushing into the longer distances where I start having to go to the bathroom a lot, like things start to fall apart. And so by topping it up and keeping that blood flow, that circulation going, I do think that made a difference in hurt. I am excited to try it again during La Burrito and UTMB. The other nice thing about it, and I do feel recovery wise where, and again, it's so hard when we have so many variables as we talked about ultra running, where it's like, is it that, is it that, like,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
the basics are like sleeping and eating enough, and like if you don't do those two, you're gonna be in a
Right.
rough spot. But I do find that I'm a little bit less sore. There's times where I'm like, wow, I'm gonna be trashed from that, and I'm like, huh, that wasn't that bad. So I think that
Mhm.
definitely is a piece of it, but also there's not really any downside. It's legal. It's easy to do. It's like,
Mhm.
if I'm feeling these effects, and maybe it's these other things, maybe it's this, I'm going to keep doing that because I like what's happening. There are no downsides to it. Just keep trying it.
Yeah, and well, and given your scenario too, like you're gonna just be incentivized to both optimize as best you can nutrition because like a mistake is just way more consequential to you. Whereas like, for me, if I make a mistake nutritionally, it's kind of like, I mean, during a race, obviously that's problematic, but like in my day to day, like I'm not gonna have like crippling pain from it. I might just have like a bruised ego in the sense that I wasn't disciplined enough to stick to the plan. But like, for you, you've probably got the nutrition stuff pretty optimized because you have to, or you experience a lot more negative. So then you kind of start looking at where are the, optimizing sleep, optimizing recovery, nutrition, and proper training inputs, the big levers, the big rocks. Then it's like, well, where are the smaller ones that I can pull to kind of help continue to move things in more of a positive direction.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's really easy when those smaller levers are less consequential to the everyday, where
Hmm.
yeah, it's just there's not as much risk. Because I do think there's certain levers that we can pull where it's like, yeah, that's a lot of risk. Let's do 4 days of speed in a row. Like,
Yeah.
that's a pretty high risk versus, yeah, taking a supplement that, like, yeah, it seems like it works pretty well. I'm going to take that risk any day. And that's not to say like, or I was going to say, that's not to say every supplement is like that. Do your homework of making
Right.
sure that that supplement is within the guidelines, that it's not on any ban list, anything like that, cross contamination. Please do your homework on all
Mhm.
of that. But we do know in this situation that's all copacetic. So yeah, caveat that. Don't just go throwing
Mhm.
supplements out there.
Yeah. Well, I mean that. Yeah, I mean, the supplement world is just kind of this weird spot too, where I mean, it's like a lot of topics nowadays where it gets kind of polarizing, where you'll get people who are just trying to sell you supplements, and then there's people who are going to tell you like, well, supplements don't work at all, like why even bother? Just eat good foods and things like that. And it's like y- the answer's in the middle somewhere there,
Yeah.
right? It's like, do you need to be taking all the supplements, every supplement? Probably not, but is there going to be a way you can optimize your lifestyle based on the specifics to you with certain supplements? Yeah, I think so. I think that's likely the case. And then when you get to someone like yourself who's competing professionally, it just becomes even more kind of tricky, where I always laugh at the kind of the outsider joke with like, oh, you run so much, you exercise so much, you must be able to eat whatever you want. It's like, I mean, I can eat a lot of like
Mm-hmm.
calories. That's
Mm-hmm.
true. But to some degree, when I'm in peak training, I have to be more mindful of where those calories are coming from because I'm asking a lot of my body. So it's like, yeah, if you're looking at it purely through the lens of energy, then yeah, I can eat more than I would if I were not training for ultramarathons. But um, I'm not really probably going to benefit from just mainlining Snickers bars to do that either. So,
Yeah, I mean, that is, I think about that quite frequently. Say you're going out to a restaurant or something, and I think, and I don't love the judgment that often comes around food. Unfortunately, seems like it's in many ways just culturally part of things. But it's like, yeah, I'm probably going to pick what to someone else looks like the quote unquote healthy option because I'm like, yes, it has the carbs, protein, and fat that I need to fuel the next exercise. And personally, for me, fried food and grease and a lot of oil just messes me up, whether I was an ultra marathon runner or not. It's
Hmm.
just with my stomach issues, like that's going to make me feel bad. And thus, my performance tomorrow and also just my daily life isn't going to feel as good. So, like, I am going to lean towards that option, not because I'm trying to be holier than thou or anything like that. It's just that fuels me to be my best. And that often,
Hmm.
I think, is a little bit of a misconception where it's like, oh, you can just eat anything. It's like, well, anyone's going to feel really bad if you crush, a Costco sized pizza. Like, that's probably, it doesn't matter if you go
Yeah,
run 30 miles the next day. Yeah, you're probably just, your stomach might hurt. My stomach would hurt
you
regardless.
still have to digest it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then to some degree, it's like, well, like we're small people relative to our energy intake. We still have the digestive tract of a small person, so
Yeah.
it's like we're not necessarily, which creates all sorts of different like scenarios between like off season and on season and all that sort of stuff. But like, yeah, you actually have to process that and make use of it too. And yeah, just throwing anything down doesn't necessarily make you feel good, regardless of whether you have ulcerative colitis or not. But um, yeah, I was gonna ask you too, like, is it difficult traveling for the international races like UTMB with that, or do you have like a protocol that you're like, okay, this is what I'm gonna do to make sure that I don't find myself. I mean, this is a problem. Like you hear, I've gotten food poisoning before traveling and just eating food that maybe I shouldn't have before a race and stuff like that. And I don't have ulcerative colitis, so do you have to like be really mindful of kind of a protocol while you're out there doing the international stuff?
Yeah, I would say that I'm pretty cautious. Like, I'm going to go to a grocery store, probably over going to most restaurants before races, or I'm very careful about what I'm ordering, or I'm a bit paranoid about it. On the plus side, living in Italy for a couple of years, I feel quite comfortable in the European food scene. Like, that is not new to me, luckily. I will say, when I was in Madeira last year, I was very conservative. I'm not sure I even went to a restaurant until afterwards because I was kind of concerned. So yeah, I would say I'm pretty bland and neutral about food before a race, and that's okay. I can, you know, have go to a restaurant afterwards, but I'm not gonna risk anything, yeah, before the race. So pretty conservative on that. I am lucky though that I just kind of know how to navigate the European scene a little bit more just from having
Mhm.
lived over there for a couple of years.
Yeah, I got some good experience. Yeah, the inter-race stuff. So, like when you started kind of solving that, was it finding the right product or I guess there's just two questions here. It's like, are you did you find the right product that works well for your stomach, and then did that allow you to eat more, or was it something, because there's kind of like a type and a quantity piece to the equation when it comes to ultra running fueling. So I just love to hear kind of more about how you sort of solved that to some degree.
Yeah, I so I'll be honest, I think the kind of opener to all of it was Spring Energy. That really was something I found that I could tolerate pretty well. When I was starting to be more open to gels. I think I always struggled a little bit with more of the more heavily processed gels, which now seems to be better. And there might not have been a problem really at all before. It was just like maybe maybe I had a couple of bad experiences. I found that for a long time too, sports products were so sweet that the sweetness
Mm,
really, I struggled a lot with like that just sugar. Um, it really set my stomach off, and so I think that I kept kind of trying to hammer the more traditional, like really sugary things, and that just didn't work for me. And then when spring started coming out, I was like, oh wow, this fruit base, like this is really, it tastes good. It's a bit more natural. It's like the more sugar from the actual fruit, etc., versus just like pounding um the simpler sugars. And so that I feel like was the gateway for me to start being like, yeah, I can take, I mean, I would try to eat something maybe every hour, maybe. I mean, at the last 30
Mhm.
miles of the first time I did Hurt were fueled off of, I'm saying sugar was, yeah, it was like Coca-Cola and Tailwind and just way too much. And so spring really helped that. I got to the point where I was like, huh, I can take in a gel every 40 to 45 minutes. This is insane. I've never been able to do that. And so I would take a spring every 45 minutes, and that was it. Like that, I can fuel 100 miles, very long distance off of just gels. I'm very happy doing that. And so that was kind of the start. And then everything kind of happened with spring. When they changed their formula to now the awesome sauce is quite a bit heavier in the fat, that really didn't work for
Mhm.
me as well. I did struggle with that. So now for a little while, kind of when that was all happening, I was like, I'm just going to experiment with a bunch of different gels. And I found like, wow, actually, I can handle more variety of gel than I anticipated. It was actually San Diego 100. Everything kind of broke right a week before San Diego 100 that I did last year. And I was like, cool, well, I'm just going to go to the store and go shopping and grab a bunch of gels and throw a little hope into the universe. This is what it is. Because I was noticing that I was really struggling with energy levels with the way that's because I was feeling just off of spring. And I tend to think that something did change a bit from when I started back in maybe 21, 22 to 24. Well, the beginning of 24, because I did Dragon's Back literally just off of spring, and I can tell you now I did not have enough energy, which I should have been taking more, but like that, it should have been okay. And so now I look back at a few performances being like, yeah, I was not getting enough fuel off of just feeling off of spring. And so with San Diego, it was kind of the first time where I've progressively been able to move from 45 minutes to 40 to 35. And now I think I'm on about every 30 minutes I can get a gel in. And then I also supplement with drink mix, high carb drink mix, which is really useful. And so now I run for NAC, and they just came out with the Boost line. That seems to sit quite well with me. And so, yeah, I'm kind of at the place where I can use a higher variety of gels, and I do not seem to struggle as much with the dips in energy levels. And also, my stomach, as long as I get the electrolytes right, seems to be pretty good with handling that. And
Mhm.
to be honest, I am very like after I think spring kind of pushed me into being very open to gels. I don't need gels to taste great. Like that kind of, precision's really good. Like Nax boost lines kind of similar. The Martin, that whole thing, that kind of high
Subtle.
high
Mhm.
carb, subtly tasting thing that's just not offensive. I'll do that all day. I have no problem with that. So, yeah, I think also a bigger shift that I had to make in the way that I thought about feeling for an ultra is I think we some people are able to use food as a motivator, as like when I get to this aid station I've got a hot cookie waiting for me, or like a muffin, or a quesadilla or something. And I'm not, that has never worked for me. I really don't eat real food. Oh, sorry. um Biggest disappointment. Sorry. Biggest disappointment to most aid stations, because I will not really eat any aid station food. I'm only eating my own food. And so I just think of food as a part of my race plan. I'm not trying to gain emotional energy or swing or positives or negatives. It is just the fuel that keeps me able to do my job and to do what I want to do. And so I really took actually a lot of the emotional attachment to food out of it, and that helps a lot. It's just like, yeah, I eat something, I eat a gel every 30 minutes. I don't really care what gel it is. It goes down. I keep going. I have enough fuel to run. And I think that that shift from
Hmm.
feeling like, oh, it's this reward, it's this fun thing, it's this thing to look forward to, helped me to just compartmentalize what I needed to accomplish by eating that.
Just a quick reminder, Maui Nui venison is one of my favorite protein sources. The reason, they have balanced an invasive species, the axis deer, that is devastating to the Maui habitat if not kept in check, all while providing some of the most nutrient-dense meat source you will find. Consider letting them know that you heard of them from me by taking a look at their website at mauinuivenison.com/bitter. You can also check out the full description of how I use Maui Nui venison at the end of the episode.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And so you're bringing some of your own food too. Is there like some solid foods that you're able to eat during these longer races, or are you just basically doing all gels and sports drinks?
100 miles will be all gels and sports drinks. I'm very comfortable and happy in that realm. I have not done a 200 miler in a little bit. It might happen again in the next year or two. We'll see. Uh, that I will, I it sounds kind of miserable to just feel off of gel, so I probably will try to incorporate some more solid foods into if I go past 100 milers. But at this point, I don't really, I'm perfectly happy feeling off of gels and sports drinks for 100 milers, so I'm probably not going to change anything at this point.
Hmm. So when you did Moab, that was prior to you kind of figuring out your nutrition. So were you just barely fueling during that whole thing?
Yeah. Well, Moab, yes.
Wow.
Moab was when I just started discovering spring. So I did have some spring on
Okay.
me and I did fuel a lot off of spring, but I was just truly nauseous and miserable for my stomach. I had a great, I mean, Mo was amazing, but from a nutritional standpoint, pretty miserable the entire race. And I would come into these amazing aid stations.
Mm.
They've got all this food. My pacers were like, sick. This is awesome. They get quesadillas and ramen, and they'd be like, okay, Alyssa, you need to eat something, and just be like, just, I hate everything. I don't want to eat any of it. I'll just keep
Uh,
eating gels. There was one section in particular, we were going up Shea Mountain, one of the bigger climbs, and the only thing that I was really getting down was candy. And but of course, it's like you're on a big climb, you eat a small piece of candy because I think they were like Halloween size, and then you sugar crash 15 minutes later. And so
yeah.
I kept doing that, and my pacer was like, Alyssa, you cannot keep eating candy. This is not sustainable. So he forced a couple of gels he was like, you have to eat this, I will not let you eat any more candy. And I was like, but I just want the candy. So it was, I now I'm like, I should probably
It's
try
like,
to
oh,
go ahead.
as I say, only in ultra running is taking in the gel, the vegetable that you have to eat before the dessert, which is the candy.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, but no, I would love to. I feel like I have things have changed pretty significantly since Moab, and it would be really fun. Yeah, I wasn't gonna put any 200s on my radar for a little bit, and now I'm kind of feeling some pull a little bit. So I'm excited to try a few different things and just see if the evolution of my nutrition um, will allow me to have a little bit more fun in that regard. Because I think
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
do
no, it
have to
sounds
eat.
like it's a big improvement.
Yeah, you do have to eat solid foods in 200. Like that, I think your mouth would just get destroyed if you were just eating
Hmm.
sports nutrition.
Yeah, no, it seems like a long way to go on just the sports products. But I mean, I'm kind of like you where, I mean, I haven't done anything long enough to really know what I would do, honestly, but I know I would plan for some solid foods because like 100 milers, especially the shorter ones where it's like, controlled where I'm finishing a little quicker,
It's
I
not
can do
that
those on
long.
just all like fluids and yeah, it's doable. But yeah, when you're talking about like a second day or a third day, it's like yeah, I would think your performance, if you can find something to just add some variety in there, would probably benefit from it. Well, I mean, like, it's just amazing that you've done what you've done, um, with that, with kind of just now being able to figure out a solution for your ulcerative colitis in terms of just like, my mind goes to like, how much faster could she get at that if she had?
I mean,
I'm sure yours does too.
I'm only 31, so I jokingly say that I I always thought I would spend my 20s trying to figure a lot of things out and then hopefully be a little bit smarter and maybe keep getting a little bit faster in my 30s. And so far, let's hope that keeps trending in the positive direction. But yeah, it's when I think back on some of the things that I've run and some of the things I've done, I was just like, wow, that was, I mean, truly feeling on hopes and dreams and not on anything of
Mhm.
substance. And so it is exciting. I mean, even just thinking about how much I messed up my nutrition at the start of UTMB last year and being like, wow, I definitely dropped 30 plus minutes just using the bathroom during UTMB. Like there's 30 minutes, that's top 10. Like that.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I am really excited to, and of course, you figure one part out, something else comes up. So I'm very realistic and like, there's always going to be something, but it is exciting to feel like maybe we're getting this, yeah, more under control.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, no, it makes sense too. And it's like it's something where it's really like it's independent of your fitness too. So it's like in what to some degree it's like you hate to see that be like a limiter. But on the other side of things, it's like, oh, I don't actually have to do really anything. Like you don't have to spend an extra 3 hours a week doing some new training modal in order to get that improvement. It's just like, okay, if I can replicate this nutrition strategy that's worked that I've discovered to work well, maybe that unlocks 30 minutes from not having to stop and maybe another 30 minutes of just being better fueled and able to run a little faster at the end of the race or things like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I definitely have many moments where I look at it and it's so interesting when you're in the race trying to identify like, oh, I'm low energy right now, or like it's really hard to be self-reflective when you're in the race. But then when you look at performances afterwards, you're like, oh yeah, I was just out of calories. That's why I felt so bad, which is the most basic thing I feel like to say in ultras. But I look at so many parts where I'm like, oh yeah, I slowed way down because I just didn't have energy. And that is something we can fix and is exciting of, oh look, I mean, I would say probably during her until Jesus, dude, sorry. Um, until 7, sorry.
We welcome cats and dogs on the podcast.
Okay, perfect. Well, this is Dwight, and he very much is trying to be a part of this. Yes, I know. Um, he's a van cat. There, Michael, his brother from the office, is still sleeping. He tries to get less involved in the podcast. I know you're bored. Um, so, uh, what I was saying is that I would say Hurt came a lot closer to figuring a lot of things out this year, up until mile 7, where just everything kind of came up. But that's okay. It wasn't the worst, and it's exciting to be like, oh, okay, cool. That was um, a pretty solid performance. Like, okay, we're figuring some things out. Um, let's keep going in this direction.
Mhm. Yeah, that's awesome. So do you track or have data on like previously and currently like how many I understand spring probably made this a little trickier to calculate in the past, but like is it, are you trying to hit a certain number of like grams of carbohydrates per hour now compared to what you're getting before? So, or is it a little more kind of ebb and flowy throughout the course of the race?
Yeah, I would say that I am probably not a super high carb person. I am definitely not in the hundreds or so range by any means. I would actually be curious how many women are. I would guess not a ton. I would say I'm happy in the 70s to 80s at most. I think when I start getting beyond that, it's really hard for my stomach to digest. And actually, I think what led to hurt um, going a little bit sideways in the last 7 or so miles is because I was trying to up the carbs. I went from uh, basically like half the amount of carb drink mix to a full amount. And it was because I was like, I'm gonna, try to, as you're, losing energy, you're obviously losing as you're going through the race. I'm gonna try to keep topping this up. And I think I just overdid it a little bit. So I would say probably my happiest is 70 to 80 between drink mix and then the gels, which I'll take. It's not the worst number for sure.
Yeah, no, not at all. And I think like we get into the speculative world when we go up into the 100 gram and beyond, even for, some of the top men, because like when you just look at just, well, what are your carb and fat oxidation rates at the intensities we're able to sustain for 100 miles? And it's like, once you're up to 100 and beyond, you're accounting for the carbohydrate side in most cases. So like, yeah, I would think that like if you just look at workload per hour and intensity, if you're at, those 60, 70, 80 grams, you're probably easily covering your bases in most of these events. So like, it's actually interesting. Like maybe if you go shorter, like a 50K or 100K, but then you also have less total energy demands over the course of it too. So even though you might need more per hour if it was sustained for longer, eventually you get to the finish line a little quicker, and you can rely a little bit on endogenous liver and muscle glycogen too. So, but yeah, it's an interesting like math equation we've got going on now with with ultra running on the fueling side.
It is. I mean, I truly, to I guess show where I was, am always happy to have anything going. Like to go from kind of, wow, this is
Yeah.
just absolute trash to like, wow, I'm getting, maybe 60 grams, like amazing. So I'm always happy when,
Hmm.
yeah, I can kind of hit those numbers and um it's definitely made a big difference. It just makes racing more fun where you can push the whole time versus just having these huge lulls where you're just trying to survive.
Hmm. Yeah, and to answer your question, you said before too, like there was some data that came out of Western states last year where I can't remember who did this. I think I actually recorded a podcast on it, and with Joe Corcione on this podcast where we talked about this and we listed the numbers that were reported. But they had, I think, all the is like almost all, if not all, the top 10 men, and then like a good chunk of the top 10 women just reporting on what they had. And, some people were a little more precise with their, their protocol, and others were a little more kind of like, I kind of got this in, and then I threw in some potato chip, that sort
Yeah.
of thing. But it was like kind of across the board. I mean, there was a decent range in general, but it was higher on the men's side than the women's side. So I think like the numbers that you suggested you're getting in seemed like was probably kind of right around what most of those women were reporting. Um, Gosh, now I got to go back and look and see what they actually were, because, but yeah, I'm pretty sure that what you were. I think the lowest was maybe 60 or slightly under 60 for one of the women in the top 10. But you're probably right in that kind of general general amount of what they were doing.
Yeah, and that's why I am so such a proponent of testing and individualizing because I think we can get really, and I feel like you are as well, where it's very easy to get on the bandwagon of more carbohydrates, more salt, all of the
Yeah.
things. And it's like, I love that people are thinking about this, like absolutely take
Yeah.
that excitement, but remember that you are an individual. You are, everything you do is based upon your system, not anyone else's. So it's so important to recognize that just because one person can take 90, 100 grams does not mean that you should. And if you're feeling bad, that's probably a reflection of that's either too much, just being really, I think what's wonderful is that we are establishing the tools to be able to figure this out, like the sweat testing, um,
Hmm.
sweat loss rate and all of that. But we have to follow through on it. We have to actually do it and not just kind of take other people's numbers and apply them to ourselves.
Hmm. No, and I think that's very well said. So awesome. Well, Alyssa, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. You've been very generous with all the information and time, but before I let you go, I want to let you give the listeners a bit of a insight in terms of where they can find you on social media, online, kind of what you're up to, or anything else you'd like to share with them.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm on Instagram as Theory in Motion. That's mostly, I've not gone the TikTok direction. I don't know if I can handle another social media platform. So, yeah, Instagram, I try to stay relatively active on that. And then I started a Substack, which is Theorizing in Motion. So, kind of try to keep that lane going. And also, I love writing, just trying to be pretty, like, just lean into that side of things more. And then I work for Uphill Athlete. I'm the host and producer of the Uphill Athlete podcast, which we should have you on. It would be great to have you on as a guest. So yeah, you can hear my voice more on the Uphill Athlete podcast if you would like. But yeah, Zach, thank you so much for this. It's really fun to chat with you.
Appreciate it. Yeah, no, it's a great podcast you guys got going on over there. It's so fun to see all the different media and just like educational resources that people have available, and yours being one of them for sure. So yeah, I appreciate the time, and I'll make sure I put all that stuff in the show notes too, so listeners can link to it if they want to go check out what you're up to.
Thanks for sticking around and listening to how I use the show sponsors. Maui Nui Venison is a product I discovered last year. What caught my eye was their quality and business model. They have paired the need to manage an invasive species with providing some of the most nutrient-dense meat you will find. The axis deer arrived in Maui in single digits but grew fast and have damaged the local ecosystem, and if left unchecked are projected to reach up to 200,000 in number in future years. Maui Nui decided to solve this problem and minimize waste. Axis deer meat provides 43% of your daily value of protein in just 107 calories and boasts a 1.5 to 1 omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, which is the most balanced ratio of any red meat. This same 107 calories provides 22% of your daily value of vitamins and 37% of your daily value of minerals. They have a wide range of products including ground venison, leg medallions, rib chops, strip loin, loin fillets, and loin chops. They also make a beef stick that includes an option with organ meats, which makes a perfect protein-packed snack that I will usually have in the afternoon before a strength session. I've also been enjoying the ground venison for dinner, usually paired with steamed vegetables or a sweet potato. You can find a bunch of recipes and ways to prepare their products on their website at mauinuivenison.com. Element Electrolytes is my go-to electrolyte supplement. Based on my electrolyte loss rate of 614 milligrams per liter, I begin my day with half a packet of one of their hot beverage flavors with my morning coffee. I rotate through all of them, but my favorite at the moment is the chocolate mint. Later in the day, I have been having either a packet of their watermelon flavor or a can of Element Sparkling, which is their carbonated electrolyte drink. I usually have the black cherry lime or watermelon flavor for those. If you are curious about how to dial in your own fluid and electrolyte setup, check out episode 300 of this podcast, where I dive into some of the things you can do at home to gauge how much fluid and electrolytes you may need. A free sample pack with your first purchase can be found at drinklmnt.com/HPO. Delta G ketones is the best researched exogenous ketone supplement on the market. The research on exogenous ketones is constantly evolving. Delta G is responsible for much of it, hosting 50 plus published studies and 20 plus ongoing studies and have received DARPA grants designed for special forces. Delta G uses ketone esters, which is unmatched in raising blood ketone levels when matched per gram. The best use case, as the evidence currently stands, is as a post-workout supplement for better recovery and or during longer, lower intensity sessions to help with mental focus. For this reason, I will have a bottle of Delta G Performance, that's the little blue bottle, after my biggest workouts for the week and during long run training sessions once I have been out running for about 45 to 60 minutes. Head over to deltagketones.com and enter BITTER20 for 20% off your next purchase. Currents, which is spelled Curranz, is a pre-workout supplement that I started using this year based on the mounting evidence that has started pointing towards them as being a potential endurance workout supplement that can help move the needle on things like recovery, blood flow, fat oxidation rate, reduce muscle damage, etc. They have 40 plus studies on their website if you want to check those out. The way I use this product is when I wake up in the morning, I usually have a cup of coffee and some electrolytes and just start my day getting hydrated. And while I'm doing that, I'll have a couple capsules of Currents along with that. And then I get out for my first workout. If I'm doing something a little bit longer, like a really long ultra-specific long run or an ultramarathon race or something like that, where I'm going to be out there for multiple hours, I'll usually have another capsule or two every 4 hours while out there doing that. So I'm excited to see what this can possibly do for some of the races I got coming up this year. If you want to check them out and some of the research that they have, head over to currentsusa.com. That's CURRANZUSA.com. And don't forget to plug in the promo code BITTER20DEAL, which will get you 20% off your first purchase. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Human Performance Outliers podcast with Zach Bitter.